welcome everybody to the Junior Developer Happy Hour. We've been doing this for a couple of months now, because especially once COVID hit, I think Sam and I both had recognized that it was going to get even harder. Like, it's already crazy trying to find your first job after you've gone to a boot camp or if you're a recent CS grad or anything. So we're just trying to make some space for people to ask any sort of questions that they might have about either the job search or just kind of career progression in general. So that is what today should be. We've got a Slido in the messages. The top link is a great place to ask questions, because that way, since it looks like there's going to be a good number of people here, we can upvote and make sure that we get to all of the questions that sound interesting for people. And then awesome, the Slack channel is also there. Sam, I'll let you talk about all of the content that you're always reading and sharing. I think that's it. Yeah, that's all I can think of. So I'll also just say that I'm Brady, and I'm a software engineer at Nordstrom Trunk Club. I went to a boot camp in 2017, and I've been working at Trunk Club ever since. And it just took me forever to realize what I was going to do when I grew up. And so now I'm really happy that I finally have a job that I enjoy doing. And it's nice that I know that I'm never going to be bored. I'm always going to have more to learn. At times that's really frustrating, but a lot of times I think it's more exciting and helps keep me interested in my work than anything else. So what I do at Trunk Club is I work on the basically the onboarding team. So as you're signing up for styling, now we're officially really folded into Nordstrom. So if you go to the Nordstrom site and you decide you want to get some personal styling, as you're signing up, we'll ask you questions about your style, and you'll kind of create an account at some point. So that part of the process is what my team works on. So we're trying to make that experience as easy as possible for everybody. I am mostly like front end at this point. I feel like I've been talking forever, so that's all I'm going to say. I'll let Sam introduce himself, and then we'll go over to Amanda.
Yeah. Hey, everybody. I'm Sam. I'm a front-end engineer at Lyft currently. I've been there almost a year now. I'm approaching my year anniversary. I build internal tools for the mapping organization. Can't go into too much details about exactly what that is. But yeah, nothing customer facing. I took a really long path to get here. The short version is I graduated long time ago from university during the dot-com bust, CS degree. Never ended up using it. Did all kinds of other stuff. Worked in the mortgage industry, joined the Peace Corps. Eventually got back into coding by going to Dev Bootcamp in 2013. And then I worked a bunch of different jobs. I've worked contracting, trying to start my own startup with my friend, to working at a small startup as the first engineer, to working at a big company that had like 10,000 people worldwide. And I worked at another public company, Pivotal, and now I work at Lyft. So there's a wide range of questions. Another reason why we give you our backgrounds is gives you some information on what kind of questions you could ask us. So I'll let Amanda introduce herself now. She's our special guest this week.
Hello, everybody. Thanks for having me. My name's Amanda. I went to Dev Bootcamp back in 2016. That's actually where I met Brady. We were in the Chicago campus. And then after that, I also worked at Trunk Club with Brady, but I joined after boot camp. I was an apprentice for 6 months. They had like a program, and I'm sure I'll talk about that later because there's probably a lot of questions about your first job out boot camp. So I worked there for 6 months as an apprentice. Then I transitioned into just a software engineering role. And I was there for 1.5 years after, so 2 years total. I was kind of on the flip side of Brady. I worked on our internal shopping platform for stylists. So, you know, we actually had like real people who are shopping for customers. So we built out the actual like little, it's like a React app for them to do their shopping. It's just like it's almost like any shopping app you would see as a consumer. It was just for our employees only. And then we also worked on data integration with Nordstrom because we were using their inventory. So it was largely probably like 60% backend at that point, 70% backend work, and then like the rest front end. I did that for 2 years. Then I moved to GitHub and I started working remotely. So I can go into detail about GitHub if people have questions about kind of the work setup. But it's like a very remote friendly place, even before like COVID and all that happened. So I've been at GitHub for 2 years. I'm on the growth engineering team. So we do like organization sign up, user sign up, different ways we can basically get people to pay us for things, which is important, I guess, to businesses or something, you know. And then we also work on, it's kind of like a different area of responsibility, but we work on like the experimentation framework at GitHub and also the feature flag framework. So we have like internal tooling for those two things, and my team maintains those for like the rest of the engineers. So if you're interested in that kind of stuff specifically, I can try to answer questions about what it's like to maintain like a tool for a company. What else? Before I was doing engineering stuff, I graduated back in 2015 from college with like a kind of marketing degree. I don't know. It was like very wishy-washy. Like I had like a double major that was just like not very cohesive. It was not like a business school thing. I graduated, ended up in sales, like a lot of people end up in sales right after college. I was an account manager at Yelp, which is just like, it's not like direct sales, but basically once a customer signs up for advertising on Yelp, I would help them like set up their account and kind of go over like how to best use it, stuff like that. I was only there for 6 or 7 months before like totally realized I'm not about that sales thing. Even like it was like light sales and I was very, very not about it. I'm just like, I just don't like pushing people to do things they don't want to do. So I did that for a little bit and then I quit that job and I went straight to Dev Bootcamp. And I can elaborate more on like that transition process or like what kind of led to that. I think that's it. I live in LA. I moved out here from Chicago. So yeah.
Cool, thank you. So I guess we can just kind of jump into the questions. I see a couple questions and nothing is upvoted yet, so we can just go in order. So I can just go ahead and read out the first one. How did you approach the job search after graduating from Dev Bootcamp?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I feel like the farther away I get from when I was doing it, like things have changed a lot, right? Like even a year or two out of boot camp, I had friends who were asking me like, oh, you know, should I go boot camp? And like, you know, a lot of people were interested. And I found myself, I don't know what the current situation is like out there for junior devs. So this is kind of like my experience from back in 2016. I imagine things are different now. But I think there's probably some things that are consistent. So I think when I graduated, it was really important that I wanted to make sure I was like still using my skills in some way. because the problem is like you learn these skills for 6 months or however long a boot camp is, and it's still really new. And I think a lot of people like after they're out of that setting of being told what to do and being told like what to work on, they just like stop coding and they stop practicing. And I think that is like gonna really, really hurt you. So there's a couple of ways to try to avoid that. One, I was really lucky that I was able to be like a teaching assistant at Dev Bootcamp immediately after graduation. So literally like the next day, I was still on campus and like doing stuff and like helping people and like pairing, and that was a really easy transition. But outside of it, I think that like working on a little project, it doesn't have to be something like super crazy. Like I worked on like some little projects. I made like a React app that like tracked your Pokemon when Pokemon Go was super hip back then. Or like I did like a Slack bot, and it was really casual. Like none of these projects became anything like super great or real, but it was something just to do. Um, and it also gives you something to talk about during interviews, which I think is a really, really high value side effect. So kind of, I did that. I would do those side projects. And I'd probably recommend people, I know people do like those hacker rank things and like the code, like code wars, like the little function practices, which is fine. I did that too. But I will say that like, I think those are good just to like do like a couple a day, but I wouldn't spend like 8 hours doing those because I don't think you're really building like cohesive skills. It's because they're very, very small. Whereas I think doing a side project, you have to think about like a project as a whole is more reflective of what you're actually doing as an engineer. So doing those things I think is really important. The second bit of like the actual job application part is you need to be really consistent. Like I see a lot of folks who apply to a bunch of jobs and then they get discouraged and disheartened, which is totally normal. But then they stop applying for like 2 weeks, right? To give themselves a break. And while that may feel good in the moment, stopping applying for like 2 weeks will set your pipeline back like 2 to 3 weeks. Because you have to think about when you apply, it's gonna take like a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks when they get back to you. So if you just cold stop when you start again, it's not like starting from where you left off. You're now like behind, and this feedback cycle you're gonna get pushed back. So I think just being consistent and not taking these long breaks, because that's gonna ultimately set your pipeline back. And then the second thing is, I think it's really tempting just to like make yourself feel good by applying to every single position you possibly see and just like spamming out cover letters and stuff like that. And I think it might make you feel good because you can like check it off your list. Like I applied to X many jobs today. But that isn't very strategic, right? Like I wouldn't waste your time, filling out applications, writing cover letters for a job that like isn't like one, it's either super, super generic posting on a career site, because a lot of companies will just keep like a software engineer position open on their site all the time, and it isn't actually mapped back to a position. Or you're applying to like a senior position, or you're applying to like something you clearly like wouldn't like, it's just not a good fit. I think you have to try to avoid like just exhausting yourself by trying to like, oh, I'm going to apply to 10 jobs, even if these 10 jobs make no sense. So you have to kind of balance that, right? And a specific piece of advice is, obviously, I'm sure everyone's looking at job boards, like LinkedIn and Glassdoor, maybe? I don't know. I use LinkedIn mostly. But I would also like, wherever city you're in, I would try to do some research on companies in general and then look on their specific career sites. So for Chicago back then, I was looking at like Built in Chicago was like a startup website. I would like read up about companies, and I would go into their like, I tried to apply directly through their pages as much as possible versus like a third party like application thing. Because sometimes like I found that like on LinkedIn or on these other places, like there's a lot of job postings that that seem to be duplicates of each other, or they're super old, or like, I don't even know who's checking these anymore. But I feel like the company's website is more up to date and it's like more cohesive. So I would keep track of like companies' websites. I would like just kind of check their website once in a while to see if they uploaded something new. Or if I found a position on LinkedIn or Glassdoor or something, I would go to their website to make sure it's there. Because sometimes like they didn't take down the listing from, LinkedIn or wherever, but it's actually not like a listing anymore. So like I would always try to find it on their site and apply through their site directly. So I did that. I had like a little Trello board that was like keeping track of my statuses of different interviews. Definitely like the code challenges. Almost every company asked me to do a code challenge, and that might just be a fluke. But all those like kept me pretty busy. And a good side effect was it kept you coding, and you didn't even have to it's kind of like two birds, one stone. You're applying to a job, keeps you coding, and it serves you to try to get that job. So I did that. And then I think the direct thing that got me my apprenticeship was our bootcamp told us to reach out to like bootcamp alum, like cold reach out, right? So that was real creepy. I knew about the Trunk Club apprenticeship because I knew I wanted an apprenticeship after Dev Bootcamp. So there was if you just look up like apprenticeships in your city, you can try to like find some resources, but I knew about the Trunk Club one. So I found a former apprentice at Trunk Club who was also a Dev Bootcamp grad. And then I found her, but LinkedIn, like I didn't want to just message her because sometimes like people don't check their LinkedIn. So I found her website, and on her website, she had her email. So I emailed her. And then we got coffee, and it was very like loose. They didn't even have an apprenticeship position open at the time. So I just wanted to like talk to her and see what it was like. And one of my goals was to find out from her if it was going to open up soon, right? So we like literally grabbed coffee at the Starbucks below the bootcamp campus. And she was really, really nice. She told me all about the apprenticeship. She then told me that it wasn't open now, but she thought that it would be open soon. She just didn't know when. So I kept that in mind. And then literally like every week I would just check the Trunk Club website and see when it opened. And then like 2 weeks later, it opened up and I applied and I put her name down. So I think that like that is largely pretty lucky of me. I mean, obviously if you have to put yourself out there and like email strangers and get coffee with them. And it happened to be like, it's super shitty almost to be like, but so much of it is like timing, and it's really unfortunate because you can't control that. Which is why like you can only control the things, right, that you can do, which is being consistent and practicing and stuff like that. And the timing aspect is just really hard because it just happened to work out that they opened their position after I graduated, right? If they opened it while I was doing boot camp, like my whole career trajectory would be different. So I think that like you can just try to control what you can and just make yourself consistent, be practicing. If you feel comfortable reaching out to people, I know not everyone feels comfortable doing that, then like do it. You can absolutely get a job without doing so, but it is 100% easier to get a job when you know somebody. Yeah, it's not, and I think that like that's where a lot of people are like, they get really disheartened because all they hear is like you have to network to get a job, like you have to network to get a job. And while that is like, it's not impossible to get a job without networking, it's just a lot harder. So yeah.
Did you have multiple jobs that you were keeping your eye on, like multiple companies that were in that same kind of, oh, I don't know when this program might open up or when this apprenticeship might be available? Did you have that?
Yeah, I had like there's another company called Innova that had an apprenticeship that was like same deal. I found like a Dev Bootcamp grad that did the apprenticeship and I emailed them about it. But they're like, for them, it never opened up by the time like I got a job already and stuff. Yeah, so there was definitely a lot of like, oh, just waiting and seeing. I don't know, this is like probably personal preference, but I try to avoid like cold messaging people and being like, hey, like, can you obviously don't be like, hey, I don't know you, but can you refer me to the specific position? So a lot of people I cold message, like there wasn't even a position attached. I just want to talk to them about their apprenticeship. Or if you're not looking for an apprenticeship, you can like just talk to them about being a junior at that company. And I think that I don't know, maybe ingratiates yourself in like a better way than like, hey, can you refer me to this job? Which is
Definitely, it's
ultimately
a lot
what you're
better.
asking. Yeah, it's ultimately what you're asking for. And like whenever people message me, I am very aware that like, hey, you ought, like your goal is to get a job. So like I try to be like, hey, like either we have this position and we can talk about it, or I'll tell them like we don't have any positions, but I'm still open to talking. Just letting you know like kind of where we're at. Um, but yeah, there's like a million ways to end up where you want to be, right? Like there's a million ways to end up with a software engineering position. And I really like don't want to be like, this is the only way you can do it. Because I think there's also like a million combinations of things you could do that could work. This is just a specific combination of things that I did that happened to work.
Yeah, I think you got to evaluate your approaches and see what's working and what's not, and you kind of just got to see what works for you.
Yeah, and it's important to keep like adjusting what you're doing,
Yep.
right? Like, and being honest with yourself if something is working or not working. Again, like don't fall into that trap of like, I applied to 10 jobs, like, woo, we're good for the day. Let me just do nothing more. You know, like if that isn't working, then like you have to start thinking about like, well, okay, well, what else is in my control that I can do?
Yeah, because I agree, a lot of it is timing and luck, but the more you put yourself out there, the more you increase your luck. So for
Exactly.
me, in the beginning, it was, I just volunteered a lot, went to a lot of meetups, did a lot of hackathons. So I met tons of people. That increases my luck, right? So, and it did. I got my jobs by just like somebody being like, hey, I'm doing this thing. I don't want to do it anymore. You want to do it? And that's how I got my first contracting job. At Code for America, they have a weekly hack night, which people can attend every Wednesday. Go on Meetup, Code for America, San Francisco. They have a virtual hack night. But yeah, so yep, just keep networking, keep building stuff, keep letting people know you're looking for a job so people know. Because if they like at a company and like a junior position pops out and you're in their mind that they know you're looking for a job, they can refer you. They get a bonus if you get hired. So there's financial incentive for them to help you as well.
Yeah, I think the only thing that I would stress out of what you two just said was timing is huge. Timing, unfortunately, you can't control it, but sometimes you're a really great fit, you're a really great candidate for a company, and they just don't have that position open at that time. So keep putting yourself out there so that when timing is right for one of the companies that are a good fit, you'll be out there. Cool. Next question. Do you recommend, as a recent bootcamp grad, accepting any new job offer, or should you potentially wait maybe more to have more offers to bid against each other?
Yeah. I think that's probably largely depending on your own threshold, right? Like some people are going to need a job right away and they literally will just have to take anything. And that's just the reality of the situation. If you're lucky enough where you can bide your time and like you're also like willing to take the risk, right, of doing so, then maybe don't accept your first offer. I think again, the timing bit is going to really impact if you can get other companies to bid against each other, because companies have their own timelines for interviews and offers and stuff like that. So you have to ask if, hey, company A, can you wait until I finish with company B? And companies totally understand that. Like, often if it's not too long of a wait, they'll let you finish the process with another company, get an offer, and then you can decide. If that's the case, if the timing is good, then I would absolutely, like, it's always worth it just to ask if, hey, can you just wait until I finish this other company's process so you can get all the information you possibly can get to make a decision. So if the timing works out for you, then yes, I would wait. Always worth it to ask for an extension on accepting or declining an offer, seeing what all of the salaries are. And it's always worth asking, right? Like, if you're like, hey, this other company's offering me more, but I do like your team better, or whatever it may be, like, could you match them? Worst case, they say no, right? And then you're just back to where you are, which is fine. And you can, like, take that information and make a decision. Worst case is they, like, rescind the offer, which would be, like, totally inappropriate for a company. And if a company did that, like, just rescinded the offer because you tried to negotiate, then that's probably not a company you would want to work for anyway. But let's say you have no other offers and there's no, like, horizon for getting another offer. Should you take that first job? Again, depends on how badly you need that job. If you need it and you just need the money and you need to be doing something, then yeah, like, there's no shame in putting money on the table and, like, getting yourself going. I do see a lot of people, if you take a position that is not ideal for, like, a junior, so this would be like, maybe the company is not that great, or like maybe the support system is also not that great. Maybe it's not in a language you want to pursue. Maybe it's like not a direct engineering position. Like, maybe it's like a sales engineering or like a support engineering position. If it's that situation, then when you accept it, you need to think about your game plan for it, right? Because for those type of things, it's like a Band-Aid on the situation, where you'll get paid and you'll get a paycheck, but there's, like, still steps you need to take to get into that full engineering position if that's what you want, right? So I think that comes down to either you take the position knowing that you're going to keep applying to other jobs while you're working in that position. Totally fine. I'm a very no loyalty to companies type of person. So you take the job, you work, you get paid, but you keep applying to other jobs that are a better fit for you. And that's totally cool. Or you can, like, if you think there's a future with this company, be very explicit in the interviewing process and be very explicit when you join, that your ultimate goal is to be a software engineer, and you need to start working on, like, a path towards that goal, either within the company, which would be ideal. Like, let's say you're a sales support engineer, which I interviewed for, like, a API engineer position at one point, which is kind of like a customer engineering position. And I asked them during the interview, like, do you have any examples of people who moved from this position to an engineering position at the company? And they told me, yes, we have one, but he studied on his own and he had to re-interview again to get that position. And I said no to it because I didn't want to do all of that. And it also was, like, reflective, like, oh, the company isn't really helping you grow in the way that you want them, if it took all of that for this one person to, like, move themselves there. That was my threshold. Obviously, other people could have a higher threshold for that kind of thing, where they're like, I'm willing to do that. So I think that, like, if I was in a really bad position and I needed to make money, I would probably take any position, with the idea that, like, I'm going to keep applying to other jobs, and I'll just jump ship the moment I get, like, the other job that I want. But that might obviously be different for everybody.
Yeah, I think I kind of had the impression that the career coaches I was working with through our boot camp expected us to only come into this situation where different companies were like in a bidding war to get me to work for them. And that's not how my situation ended up at all. But I was really, really lucky that the company that I ended up getting my first offer from was in the location, like in the city of Chicago, where I wanted it to be. It was the size of the company I wanted. It was the languages I was interested in learning. And everybody at the company that I'd interviewed with seemed really excited about teaching each other and excited about working there. So it was such a great fit. I didn't hesitate to accept. I negotiated my offer, but I didn't hesitate to accept that. And I didn't feel bad about like waiting until I can pit two companies against each other or something like that. So I think, yeah, if you can swing it, if you can get everything in the right position, it's only going to help you be able to get a better offer. But there are other ways to negotiate at the same time. So if you get a great offer, I don't think it's necessary.
Yeah, I just want to add, in this current environment, I probably would just take it unless I was super confident that I can get. If I'm able to get interviews pretty easily, then maybe I would wait. But if you're struggling to even get an interview, I would probably just take the offer, even if it was a shitty offer, as long as there's no red flags that this place is gonna suck to work at. I don't want to work with this person that interviewed me or whatever. I would just take it because, like Amanda said, you can just bounce. I quit a startup after working 1 week one time. I went in there and I was like, this is not a good fit. This is not what I thought it was gonna be. I'm not gonna stick around. So I just bounced. I stayed a month, but I gave my notice after the first week. I stayed a month just to finish up some stuff I was doing and give them some time to like re-interview people. So yeah, in this game, like everybody just bounces when when a better opportunity comes around. Usually, that's just kind of how the tech industry works.
Cool. All right, so next question we have, after graduating from bootcamp, how did you find your niche as a developer? Meaning, how did you find what you liked to work on, front end versus back end and framework?
Yeah, that's actually one of the reasons why I wanted to do an apprenticeship first. I definitely applied to non-apprenticeship positions too, but I really wanted an apprenticeship position because it's like you get to learn stuff for like a set period of time without any pressure. So what I did during my apprenticeship is I asked to work. My plan was to work in back end for 2 months, then front end for 2 months, then I did mobile for 2 months. And it went really well. I really liked it. I learned what I needed. Well, I think I needed to learn to be successful. I ultimately found that I like doing full stack. If I was forced to choose, I would probably choose back end. Simply because like front end, sometimes it's just nice to see things like to fruition and be like, oh, I can see a thing on the page. It's great. But I personally just am not. I would never be a completely front end engineer. But I would consider being a completely back end engineer. But my preference is being a full stack engineer. I think that like it's going to be kind of hard, like kind of going off the last question. If you accept a position, like I said, and it's not your ideal stack, you kind of have to live with that for a bit. I will say that I think you have to be pretty proactive about this piece because I've seen people get like pigeonholed really quickly, right? Like they started as a front end developer and then like they never got a company to give them a shot at doing back end stuff. And it's like 4 years later and like people only consider them for front end. So I think that you have to try to be like really, really proactive in like your role and picking up back end work, trying to like, if you're on the team, trying to be like, hey, could I do this? Could I do that? Even like small things, like just one small issue or one small bug. because you have to be kind of defensive about being pigeonholed if you're not in the place that you want to be. I think it is easier for a back-end engineer to transition to be a front-end engineer than the opposite way around, though. Like in my experience at the 2 companies I'm at, I've always seen back-end engineers like having to or being expected to do front-end stuff, but I've rarely seen like a completely front-end engineer all of a sudden being expected to like dive into back-end work. So that's just something to also consider. I also went to Dev Bootcamp because I specifically wanted a full stack program because I didn't know what I wanted to do when I got out. So I specifically went in with like, I want to do full stack to start because that will give you the most amount of options. And it also just gives you a lot of insight into both sides if you end up on one side only.
Yeah, for me, I just did whatever I needed to do at the job. And eventually I ended up at a job where they needed a lot of front end help. And then I liked it. So I just kept going down that hole. So the decision came easier for me. It's just like I did what I had to do at the job.
Yeah, I also don't know that I necessarily chose. I think I've always had this, I've wanted to know, like front end or back end, I don't know. And so I've just tried to, yeah, stay balanced. And if one of my jobs, if one of my positions has a heavy focus on one of them, try to balance it out with other work on the other side of things. Because I was afraid. I hadn't even talked to anybody like what Amanda was saying, that people maybe got pigeonholed and stuck in one position. But I was just worried that maybe that would happen. And so now, yeah, I feel like I've got a good base. And maybe someday, I don't know, both can be fun for me, but yeah, I don't know. I guess you know if you like one or the other, and if you don't know, then you do what the work requires you to do, maybe.
Yeah, having like no preference is a perfectly fine preference.
Yeah, if you go to work for a small startup, you're probably gonna have to do everything.
Yeah, everything. Yeah.
You might even have to do mobile. You might have to do front end, back end, mobile. When I worked at a small startup, I had to build them a mobile app, but I needed to crank it out quickly. So I just built like, back then there had like these kind of like phone gap. I don't know if people still do that because we have React Native now. So I kind of just reused some of our front end code and just packaged it up as like a mobile app because it was a simple mobile app. It was just like forms to collect data out in the field. But yeah, I was the first engineer, so I had to do front end, back end, and mobile.
Cool. We can go on to the next question. How about strategies around preparing for data structure and algorithm technical interviews?
Obviously, there's a ton of resources out there that you can like practice these things, right? So one part is just practice those things and then you'll know them, right? Like it's literally like school, study them and then you'll know them. I think that actually is the easier part. The harder part for people is how to show up in an interview and be able to do it, right? Like I think there's a lot of like a technical interview is like very different from anything I had done before. So that part I think is actually harder for people is how do I know how to do the thing. How do I do it in like an environment where I'm in a technical interview and like someone is standing or sitting next to me? That part is going to be difficult because how do you practice that? You're probably like, if you can get interviews, and it's unfortunate that you have to practice kind of at interviews. Like I used to try to stack companies I really, really wanted to work at if I was interviewing for them after companies I don't want to, because I would use the first ones as practice to just like try to get that flowing. So I think you need a couple of things. one, study the thing, and then you just know the thing, right? Study, practice, that's it kind of on your own time. Two, practice being able to communicate what you're thinking. So when you're like kind of working through all those algo problems and doing those exercises online, like practice writing down what you're thinking when you're doing them, practice being able to like write it or verbalize what you're thinking as you're doing those problems, because that's what you're gonna have to do during the interview, right? It's not just about like, let me sit here for 2 hours and crank out all these exercises. Like take that time to exercise, like how do you talk about this? And then two, I know it's hard, but after I started interviewing people as like the opposite side as an interviewer, the people interviewing you are just like regular folks, and this is just an hour outside of their day that was put on their calendar. And like when I show up to interview and I'm interviewing something, I'm not like coming at it with this like really aggressive, critical, like, you know, this is like my entire job. This is literally just a thing in my day that happened to pop up. So like, I don't know if that comforts you in some way. We're like, hey, it's really not a big deal to them. So like try to be comfortable and casual. And interviewers are literally, they're just people. Like, especially when you're interviewing with other engineers, like they're just other engineers. Like it's not like they, I wouldn't put them up on like this crazy pedestal. And I don't know if that would like comfort some people, but after I became an interviewer, interviewing got so much easier because then I started seeing these people as like, oh, this is an hour outside of your day. You're probably stressing about like other things you need to get done. And that just made me a lot more like comfortable and casual. But yeah, I don't know, practice those. I was really lucky. I didn't get asked like in any of the interviews I've ever been on in the last 2 years. I didn't get asked like very like super like build this data structure questions. All the interviews I went on were like, let's talk about how you would build this app, or let's talk about like this little code challenge, right? That's like a little app, or it's like a little, you build like a little script or something like that. So I never was in a position where like I was, you know, asked to like build a list or traverse a tree or something. I personally, this is like an interviewing philosophy thing maybe. I would really question companies who are using that as like a metric in their interviewing process. Like I've never had to freaking like super deeply think about like traversing a binary tree at work. And maybe that's just because like I'm a full stack engineer who works on like a web application. I just don't have to think about that as much, but I don't know. I that's for me, it's like a personal red flag. If a company seems to like really want to puff out their chest and be like, oh man, we're going to like try to grind you into the ground with like these data algorithm questions. It'd be kind of like a warning sign to me, like, oh, because that is absolutely not what you're working on during work.
Yeah, in my experience too, I haven't had much data structures, algos questions in an interview, except Google gave me a pretty hard one. I still don't know how to solve. It was some kind of dynamic programming, backtracking problem that they wanted me to write. Pretty much program like a Roomba, like, you know, the robot that cleans your room. They pretty much wanted me to code like a simplified version of that on the whiteboard. Make the robot clean every spot in the room without knowing how big the room is and without knowing what's inside the room, all the obstacles. I don't know how to do that. I never got an offer either. But for practice, it is good to practice, even though you might not get this kind of question a lot, at least for like smaller startups. If you're going to FANG companies, probably you get at least one pretty hard algos data structure problem. But other companies is just usually like a easy or medium leak code question. I haven't seen like a hard leak code question in any of the interviews I went outside of like Google. So the practice is just do a lot of leak code. And then once you get comfortable, you got to practice with real people, because like Amanda was saying, that's the hard part. Like even doing it virtual, still somebody's staring at you on the screen, watching you code like live. That gives me anxiety still. So the only way to get better at it is to just keep practicing. So you can use tools like interviewing the IO. They have like Aline was on last week. They have a free tier to just practice with like peers. If you do get lucky and get a interview at a FAANG company, before you go in, I would definitely pay the $100 to do the practice interview with the engineer from the company that you're interviewing at. It will probably increase your chances a lot. Because even for me, I work at Lyft now. I interviewed there twice. I didn't get an offer the first time. A year later, I interviewed again, and it was a lot easier because I did the interview before, and it didn't really change that much. I even got a couple of the same questions. So practice, yeah, that's the best way.
I think it's more typical than people realize to have, if you get multiple chances to interview at a company, you might get the same question over and over again.
They don't change it that much, companies. They'll just reuse the questions to death. Like you can even search on Glassdoor. I searched on Glassdoor for Pivotal one time because somebody was asking me for advice, but I was like, I interviewed at Pivotal twice too. Almost every company I've been at, I've interviewed at the company multiple times. I don't get in the first time. I'm not good at interviewing. But I had interviewed like 3 years previously when I at Pivotal, and this other girl on LinkedIn messaged me, and she had an interview at Pivotal. So I did like a video chat with her, and I practiced interviewing with her, and I gave her the same question. I'm like, you might get the same question, because I looked on Glassdoor and people are still talking about this question 3 years later. And she went in the interview and it was the same question that they've been using for like 3 years, maybe even longer than that. So yeah, it's just hard for the companies because they got to stop what they're doing, come up with like new questions. So
so for practicing, I think it's something that you can kind of start to memorize in a way. So I like to tell people, practice those problems. And then if you want to try to get comfortable with that problem before you practice in front of another person, do the same problem a couple times with like time in between. You're gonna, any problem that's similar and needs to be accomplished in a similar way, you're gonna start that, and you'll be able to work through that problem faster in the future.
Yeah, and I just want to add one more thing. Make sure you at least know how to do binary search. That's a super common question that comes up in interviews. I think they might not frame it as like, do a binary search, but they're gonna hide that within the question that you're gonna have to do. They want to see like, okay, you get like 1 million tweets and you got to find this thing in there. How are you gonna get it? So just the simple kind of algorithms, that's the one I see come up the most, binary search. That's like a basic computer science question. That's why they want to just test that, like some basic computer science usually. Because like Amanda was saying, day to day, most of the algorithms and data structures are hidden behind just libraries that we just use, and we don't think about it too much. We're like, I know this one is performant. This library is good. I'll just use that. You don't have to think about it too much unless you're like really senior and you have to like architect some like system that's going to be used by a lot of people. Then it's going to be super important for you to know your algorithms and data structures really well. But when you're starting out, I'm 7 years in. I don't use that knowledge too much.
Cool. Next question. Words of advice for being an effective remote team member.
Yeah. I guess it depends on if the majority of the company is remote or if it's. I guess some crossover things would be like you need to over communicate and write everything down. Basically, write everything down so somebody can reference it at a different time. So I find myself doing that a lot, even if I'm having like a quick Zoom sync with somebody, or we discussed it in Slack, either publicly or like in a DM. I'll usually take that and put that somewhere, right? So like at GitHub, it's usually like an issue. I'll like summarize it and update like an issue with like, hey, this is we talked about in Slack or we talked about it over Zoom. This is what we said. Like here it is for everybody to see. So over communicating. Everything that you do, I think. Also, when you're remote, a lot of people like that I talk to are like, oh man, if I was remote, like I get so lazy and do nothing, and I just like get fired from my job. I think that's very opposite. My experience is when you become remote, you almost become hyper aware that you need to make sure people know that you're working because you're afraid of getting fired. So it's almost like you are very critical about like, I want to get artifacts out. So that's like, hey, I want to show that I pushed up a PR today, or I reviewed something today, or like I need some tangible things to show that I worked. So that's another thing about a remote job is like you need to try to put things out there of like, hey, this is what I did today. These are like the PRs and stuff like that. Other things for remote, I mean, it's hard to get to know your coworkers. Like it's different. You don't just like get to hang out. You don't get to like eat lunch together and just like, if you hop into like a meeting, you're like talking about the things of the meeting. There's not a lot of room for like just chit chat, which is great if you want effective meetings. So you have to put in some like extra effort. If you want that relationship, right? Which some people don't. Some people really just could care less. But if you want that relationship, and one of the reasons why I say like it's nice to have that relationship with people is because they can get you jobs later on. Like I am friends with a lot of engineers now, and we're friends. But I also know that like, oh, I would be willing to help them, right? If they were looking for a job. And there are also people I look at for like, oh, I want to work with you again. And in order to do that, you have to be like a little more proactive about like trying to get that social aspect. So, chit-chatting in Slack or like setting a time up to like just get like a virtual coffee with people and just hang out. You have to be like super proactive about doing that kind of stuff. Again, also, I will say that I don't think remote is for everybody. I know the whole world is like kind of going through like an experiment trying it right now. But I do think that remote is not for everybody, and that's okay. But I do also think that a lot of times really trying remote work is done a disservice because a lot of companies don't do it well. So like you might think that you don't like remote work, but it's actually not remote work. It's that company's implementation of it that you don't like. Because even at Trunk Club, we had some remote people, but they were like the super minority. I mean, there was like 10 people who were remote, and we were constantly forgetting to like pull up the conference video for them during meetings. Like we're constantly forgetting to like tell them things that we had discussed like in the little team office area, and that I imagine is like a horrible experience to do remote in. So I will say that if you do try remote, and this is what I looked for when I was looking for a remote job, because I specifically looked only for remote jobs this last like round of interviews. I looked for companies that were like over 50% remote. Because what that means is that the company has to over communicate and they have to basically build every process to work for remote people. So I looked for that. The other big reason why that's also important is because your career growth at a company can be affected by you going remote and if everyone else isn't remote. And this is something that companies are pretty upfront about. Like I think at Trunk Club, they were pretty upfront with me when I asked about it, that like your career growth is going to be impacted because you're not here. But if most of the company is remote, they obviously can't do that. So I would really encourage you to like look for a company that's over 50% remote, or like a lot of the new companies nowadays, like Twitter, Square, I think Slack just started like opening up remote positions for everybody. That's also a good sign. It might be a little bit tougher for them because I'm sure they're trying to figure out the logistics of all that. But I would not go remote for a company that isn't like clearly bought into it, because you're just gonna have a bad time. You're gonna have a bad time. They're gonna have a bad time. Everyone's gonna have a bad time.
Yeah. Another thing I would add, oh, echoing. Is it still echoing? No. Okay. One more thing I would add is just if you're gonna take breaks to like go to the grocery store or a bike ride, sometimes it's sunny outside and I'm stuck on a problem, I'll go for a bike ride just to like, hopefully, maybe I'll think of the answer while I'm on my bike ride, like getting my mind away from the computer. Let everybody know. I'll go into the Slack and be like, yo, I'm gonna be offline for like an hour or two. Otherwise, like people might be trying to DM you and stuff like that, and they're gonna be like, why is he not answering? So that's a part of over communicating to let people know when you're away, so that they know that you're not available right now.
Yeah, kind of also about that. I think every company is a little bit different culture-wise, so just understanding the culture of like response expectations. So, for example, at GitHub, it's expected that you give someone like a day to respond to like an issue comment or something like that. And then also for like DMs and stuff, there's that expectation that like not everyone's going to answer you right away for a variety of reasons. So you have to evaluate like the culture of that at your company, because I know there are, like kind of Sam said, there's companies I know that like they do expect you to respond if unless they're told otherwise.
Yeah. Cool. Can you go on to the next question unless you got something to add, Brady?
Yeah, I'm trying to think. I guess for and now I wish I hadn't marked it. Here we go, the archive. It's just in general being an effective remote team member. I think it also is important to understand what works well for you, because I've noticed for myself, I'm much more just awake, and like I feel so much better when I can get up and go for a walk first thing in the morning before my first meeting. So remembering to find a good way for you to work remotely is going to help you just in the long run be a better team member remotely also.
Yeah, just to add on that made me think. I let everybody know that I'm not a morning person, so that they don't schedule meetings at like even 9 o'clock in the morning. I hate that. So as long as you let people know, maybe there's less chance they'll try to be accommodating to you.
Most calendar apps will let you set working hours. I highly recommend you set your working hours, so then they can at least see what hours that you expect yourself to be on.
Yep.
Cool. All right. So next one is, what was your biggest challenge transitioning from junior to senior software engineer?
Biggest challenge. I think I got really lucky because I had a lot of really good managers, which is like super important because they're like they can be your biggest advocates, and ultimately, if at a lot of companies, if your manager wants to promote you, like they can make it happen if they really, really want it. I think the biggest challenge for a lot of people though is to be given enough responsibility that they can prove themselves to be promoted. So I think that's like kind of hard for a lot of people. Like when you're a junior, it's hard for, and you have like other seniors on your team, you know, big projects and like big chances and opportunities to like prove yourself and whatnot are often given to like seniors, right? Because the company just wants it done. So that can be like hard to like try to get that responsibility and get these things under your belt that you can use as evidence for your promotion. As far as like trying to get that, I think trying to advocate for yourself and like asking for things like, hey, I know this project's coming along, like, can I be put on it? You might obviously not like lead the project, but like, hey, can I just like help? And trying to find avenues where you can be useful. Like if you're like if you're just like helping a senior on a project, being like, oh, well, what can I do? Can I help like summarize things? Can I help organize things? Can I help like do things that maybe no one else is doing? And all of a sudden you can just snatch up that responsibility to do it. I would recommend doing that kind of thing. I think for me, I got, again, good timing, bad timing sort of thing. My first job at Trunk Club, like 2 months after the apprenticeship and being a software engineer, like more than half the team quit. So it was just me and one other engineer. And the company had no choice but to like give me things to do that I otherwise would not have probably been given to do. And to be honest, should have been given to do. It was questionable, right? Like it was very questionable. But it happened, and like it's stressful. Like I remember it being stressful, but I also remember thinking like this is a really big opportunity. That if I can do this, like the company will have to like promote me or do something. So that was kind of looking out for looking for kind of the silver linings in shitty situations that can happen on teams. Like let's say, I mean, there's a million things that can happen on your engineering team. Like let's say there's a big tech debt issue, or there's like an incident, and maybe you could try to like squeeze your way in there to like be like, I'm interested in like helping. And trying to identify those areas of responsibility that you can grab and then use as evidence later on. Kind of same thing for my current company. I came in as an engineer 2, and then I got promoted to like a 3, which was like not that huge of a jump. And then I got promoted to a senior, and again, the same kind of thing kind of happened where my manager went on paternity leave, and then the senior engineer that was on the team also went on paternity leave. So it was just me and like 2 contractors and a junior. And I was explicitly told like there's going to be a vacuum that's left when all these people are on paternity leave and they're gone. And I knew like, okay, well, it's going to be really stressful, but if I can try to attempt to fill that vacuum and like just take initiative to do things, right? So I tried to, for my manager being on leave, I was like, okay, I explicitly told my interim manager, like, I want to work on speaking out more during my backlog review. I want to be involved in all these other cross-functional meetings that my manager usually is on, because now there's no engineering voice in those meetings. So somebody should go. And then engineering-wise, like, it was really stressful trying to pair with like all these people who need to be ramped up, but like you just have to kind of do it. So I think like keeping your ear to the ground for opportunities and seeing like, oh, something is like important to the organization and it's not going well. Like, what can I do to like insert myself into there? Because I think that's like the biggest challenge is like someone can see you as a junior forever because you're only ever given junior tasks. And that's really easy, right? Because it's like, oh, well, what can you do for the company is like these smaller tasks. And you're never given an opportunity to do more. So you have to kind of identify those little gaps for yourself if your manager isn't helping you, which also like kind of sucks. If your manager isn't helping you stretch and like saying like, I want to challenge you with X, Y, Z, you're going to have to kind of do that of your own accord a little bit. But yeah, that's like a really big challenge is you need a lot of evidence to prove that you should be promoted, right? And that could be any level. So also collect your own evidence. Like I have a note doc with like things people have complimented me on. I have a note doc of like review feedback I've gotten that I saved somewhere. I keep my own notes on like different things I've worked on. Those are all like, just keep it for yourself so you know what you've done. And yeah, if you don't think that you can move forward in a company, again, bounce. Like that's kind of what happened with me at Trunk Club. The gap from 2 to 3 was like really large there, and I had not seen a lot of people move. Like there were just so many of us stuck at 2, so I bounced. So that's another kind of thing to look out for. If you don't think that the opportunity is there to grow, then you should probably look externally.
Yeah, just a couple things to add. A lot of companies have like a document that tells you the requirements they're expecting for each level of engineering at the company. So you can take a look at that and like try and demonstrate like qualities for like the level you're trying to reach. You can also always just ask your manager like every time. Like most companies, you have a one-on-one with your manager on a regular schedule, whether it's every 2 weeks. Some companies is less, maybe just once a month. Some is even more. I think at Pivotal, it was once a week. So just let them know like your goal is to like move up. Hopefully your manager can like help you achieve that goal. So just always speak up. Even I worked at a company called Here Technologies. Every time I had a one-on-one with my manager, I asked for a promotion. I think almost every single meeting, like your manager would be like, "What can I do for you? You can give me a promotion. I did all this stuff." And I got 3 promotions while I was at that company in 3 years because I asked every time. Sometimes you won't get it unless you ask.
Yeah, definitely definitely make it known that that's what you're trying to do and enforce a plan with your manager. Like, this is what we're doing, right? And like, yeah, definitely do that.
Yeah, I have one-on-ones with my manager every single week, and it is nice that we've had this like career ladder that kind of tries to describe what you should be doing at each of the levels. And I talked to my manager about a year ago. I was like, I think a lot of these are really ambiguous, and I don't understand what you're actually expecting based off of them. So don't be afraid as you're trying to make the jump to a next level. Don't be afraid to ask more questions, get more specifics, really understand like when I do this, that means I am accomplishing that requirement to be moved up to the next level. And
Also,
Yeah.
just like little caveat, there's a lot of companies that also like you could be the best engineer ever and they want to promote you, but again, just like hiring and timing, it's like, oh, they might not be able to promote you. So you could do all the things and be like the best person ever, and like your manager's like, oh my god, like we need to promote you, but there could be like, you know, higher things happening where they don't have the bandwidth or they don't have the money or I don't know, whatever reason, right? In which case, again, think about bouncing, because like, what are you going to do? Like, even if you're doing everything you can, there might be external sources that won't make it possible, basically.
Also, one last thing I wanted to add is you just got to really think about if you really do want to move up. Most times the next level might be a lot more stressful. Like if I move to the next level at Lyft, I think my amount of stress in my life would go a lot. So at least right now, I wouldn't want to move up, I think. I'm not at a stage where I'm like, think I'm like ready to move up like to the next level.
And then just looking at the question one last time, it was asking what the challenges were transitioning. For me, I was really like, I was really unsure of my own skills. I had a lot of imposter syndrome. So I think I was just my own challenge. But once I kind of got over that and we would be in meetings and my manager would say, hey, does someone want to help with this task? And I just started always saying, yep, I'll do that. Yep, I'll figure that out. as much as I felt like I could fit it all in my schedule and actually deliver in the time frame, it has with losing all of my team members like Amanda, it has forced me into a lot of other situations, and I've just learned so much more than what I was comfortable focusing on within the time frame.
Also, I don't being like a senior at different companies can mean like all sorts of different things. Titles at different companies mean completely different things. But in my experience and what I look for when I like interview seniors is not just like technical skills. It's not just about like, oh yeah, you can like do this, obscure technical problem. There's actually a lot involved with like being a senior on a team that is like non-coding things, like understanding how to scope projects, understanding how to plan projects, understanding how to like drive decisions and drive progress, and knowing like how to make calls on different trade-offs. There's a lot of, I think, what I don't know if I categorize it as like process maturity that you have to understand, like how to work as engineer, how to get other people, like how to get like something across the line. So developing those skills outside of like the code is really important. And I think that ultimately like the value that senior engineers bring to a team isn't just like, oh, they can do the hard problems. Senior engineers bring like the skills to make the other people around them better and make like everyone more efficient. So that's also something to think about when you're developing your own skills. Like, don't just only focus on like, I want to do this technical task and then this next level of technical task and then this next level of technical task. You have to develop these like, I don't know, these like non-coding skills too.
Yeah, it really helps. It really helps to understand the business really well too. So that you only do that the longer you're at the company, you'll learn about the business and what they're trying to do. So yeah, it's definitely not only about technical skills. I think a lot of junior developers just focus on that, but you also got to understand the business really well. But just wanted to add one more thing. We still got a lot of questions in the Slido, so I don't know if we'll get to all the questions this week. So make sure you upvote the questions that you want answered. Should we move to the next question?
Yeah. So the one that's up top at this point is, as a new developer, do you recommend the experience of wearing multiple hats in a startup environment, or maybe a more supportive and targeted job at a large corporation?
Yeah. I guess I can only speak to my experience. Truck Club is like a medium-sized startup, right? It was like 200 people. The engineering department was like 60 people when I joined, which worked out really well for me. I think that it's not. We have at GitHub, we have an apprentice on my team that started 2 years ago, and like her situation is much different. She's working at a company with like 600 engineers, and like there's a lot more going on. It's also like a huge monolith, and I think we have had very different experiences. But I think what's more important than like the size of the company and like a startup is just a company needs to have a clear plan for how they're going to support a junior, right? Like a small startup either has a clear plan on like, we don't want to make a junior wear multiple hats because that's not going to be good for them, and like be treating them like they're not a junior basically and forcing them to do all these different things. Like they could have a plan where they're like, okay, there's a lot going on. We're a startup. Obviously, you have to do a lot of these things. And if we take on a junior, we need to make sure that we have like a plan for what they're going to be working on and like how they're going to, like what the scope of their work is. And same for a large company. A large company could have that plan in place and be able to support a junior, or they could just be like, have nothing, and you're still in the same situation where on your team you're wearing multiple hats and it kind of sucks. So I think you have to look at the company and ask them like how they support their juniors, what their plan is, and if they don't have specifics, then they probably don't have a plan. So I don't know. My personal preference though is I think it is easier to start at like that middle-sized company, because you still have like a decent amount of complexity with like the actual system that you're working with, versus a startup that you might not have as much complexity to work with. And it's just like a nice happy middle ground, you know, that like 50 to 100 people engineering departments, kind of, that's what I liked a lot. But I know that there are like huge companies, like mega corporations, that have really good rotational programs, where like they have the benefit of like really, really stable support systems that you could use. I do think that it's worth getting a variety of experience though, because that's one of the reasons why I moved to like a larger company, and I also moved to like a software as a service company, because I wanted to be a part of a company where like engineering was like the big department, and that's a very different experience than being a part of a company where engineering is not like the core focus. So I think there's value in moving around. When you're a junior, I think it's more important to be directly interviewing the team that you're going to be on, asking those questions about like, what would I be working on? Is there like a plan? What's the support system like? Stuff like that. I think it's more, you need to think like more focused to the team and like the area you're going to be working in, versus like, oh, like this entire company, because day to day, even at GitHub, if you're on one side of the team versus like where I'm at, it could be a totally different experience. It's hard to have consistency across something like that.
Even at Lyft,
your team, like your specific like area.
yeah, within the company, it can vary a lot. So it can be totally different depending on what team you are. So it's hard to just look at a company and see how they operate inside, because one team might be you work on all kinds of stuff, and one just needs you to work on front end or back end or mobile or whatever. So yeah, that's always a really hard question. Everybody always asks. It's also subjective, I think. So that's why it's hard, because some people like doing all kinds of stuff. They like being a jack of all trades, and then some people are like, I'm full blast front end. I love CSS, or I love JavaScript, or I love everything in the front end, or I love data engineering, working with like large data sets. And so that's a tough question.
Yeah, and maybe evaluate your own learning style. Maybe you're like a breadth learner, right? Like what Sam was saying, or you need like that time to do depth first. Could be totally different what you need in terms of support.
I notice I start to feel a little bit overwhelmed if there's too many different things going on at the same time. So I feel like I do like to dig into a project and dig deep. But I've noticed that at a company the size of Trunk Club, when I joined, I think there were like, 70, so a couple more people than when Amanda joined. And even now we're under 100. I think we're under like 90 right now. And what's cool is we're still small enough where if somebody sees something that they'd like to change, we're small enough where we can make that change pretty quickly. We did just become a much more integrated part of Nordstrom like 2 weeks ago, so I'm not sure how much that's going to continue, and maybe I will get to see a better, a different perspective of working at a huge company. But it's cool to be able to see things that you have worked on so quickly, no matter if it's for other people in the office or for the end user. Yeah, so I think it also, that may be not so much depending on the size versus just the company and how willing they are to make changes. Because I know a lot of smaller companies that are like, no, this is how we've always done things. Go away, engineer. Yeah, something to consider though. All right, next question. What are your thoughts on renegotiating an offer for a better offer? Do it.
Is this renegotiating or reneging?
Oh,
Reneging.
Very different things.
Okay, sorry.
I've never reneged on an offer before, so I don't really know how that goes. I suspect that there's probably like a scale of malice involved, right? Like maybe there actually is a legitimate reason why you can't, you don't want to take it, or like some unfortunate timing. I mean, you're gonna be burning a bridge, and it just depends on like,
Yeah.
is that new offer worth burning that bridge, right? If it is, and you're like, I really don't foresee myself working at this company, although those people could leave that company, right? And then like you could run into them later down the road. I don't know if they remember you. But ultimately, if I had like a way better offer, like let's say I accepted the offer that was like, you know, like 100K lower than this other offer, okay, I would renege probably. Like that threshold, I would probably renege. And I would try to do it in the most polite way possible as to not burn the bridge, like completely. But I think that the other person on the other end, like the recruiter, has to understand like this is a market, there's competition, this is business essentially. And if I told them like, hey, I got this other offer, it wasn't on the table at the time that I accepted yours, and it is like unless you can, do something completely different, it's just like I can't say no. That's up to you though. I mean, some people might have different philosophies on like if accepting an offer is like it's some sort of like on like your honor type of thing, maybe. I don't know. But I think that recruiters are used to this type of thing, and it's a part of like kind of the way the world works at the moment. I would not make it a habit, obviously. Like, don't accept something just to renege. Like, don't accept like 10 offers to renege 10 offers, right? To accept the 11th one. Definitely, your first option should be like if you think something's going to come down the pipeline, like another offer, you should ask for an extension on the first one before accepting. And once you accept an offer and you feel good about it, probably don't continue like interviewing and applying to other jobs just to put yourself in that situation again. For example, when I accepted the position at Trunk Club, I did go on one more in-person interview that was already scheduled. And I was kind of put in a position of like, if I had gotten it, would I have reneged? I didn't have to make that choice because I didn't get that one. So I don't know. I think I might have. I'm not sure. But again, try to not put yourself in that position. You know?
Yeah. Especially if you're in a small place like San Francisco. Recruiters talk to each other. So be careful with your bridges you burn. So yeah, just I would agree to ask for an extension. If you got other stuff in the pipeline, most companies they'll they'll let you finish all your interviews just so you can make the best decision for yourself. If they don't, that might be kind of a red flag. If they like some companies, they'll put like a deadline. They're like, you got to let us know in 2 days, otherwise contracts null. But most companies, I think they'll give you time to finish up your round of interviews if you're lucky enough to have multiple interviews in your current job search. But yeah, if you get offered this 100 grand more, I think the recruiter would understand if you renege to go on that other offer. My offer at Lyft was actually more than 100,000 more than my last job. I didn't renege. I just left the job, but I think they understood why I left after only being there for 8 months.
Yeah, there's definitely companies that will just when you leave a job, a lot of companies will try to get you to stay, but if they can't match the offer, they will just, yeah, they just won't say anything. They won't even counter offer.
Yeah, I think just being as polite as was mentioned and trying to give as much logic and reasoning behind your decision. Because yeah, what if the company that you originally agreed to start working for, if they can change any of their situation to make it better for you to work there, might be possible. Communication in general is always a good choice in life.
But accepting offers and making it a pattern to renege them is not like a advisable strategy, I would say. So there's like a threshold for like, don't make that a pattern for what you're doing.
Yeah, definitely. Also, we're approaching 1:30. Are you able to keep going, Amanda? I'm down to keep going, but if you gotta bounce, just let us know.
I got nothing to do during this quarantine, so.
I'm the same way. I barely leave my house.
Cool. So next one, what were your favorite resources you utilized while on the job search? Like job board sites, skills building sites, networking sites, dev tools, Chrome extensions.
I really like LinkedIn as my preferred job board. It just seems easier, plus like everyone's on it. I think I mostly applied through LinkedIn for my first job search and my second one. Or at least I use LinkedIn to find the job posting, and then I would like go to their website to actually apply. As a part process-wise, I recommend setting up like a Trello or a spreadsheet or something to track all of your positions and like write down notes about them. Let's see, skill building sites, networking sites. I didn't attend like meetups and stuff. That was recommended, but like I was just not very good at like showing up to places for like a meetup. So I didn't do that. I reached out to people via LinkedIn or their emails to grab coffee with them, just to put myself on their radar, I guess. And then there is a Chrome extension that, I don't know, maybe this is probably kind of creepy. There's a Chrome extension that will help you find like the work emails for people. I forgot what it's called, but there is like this Chrome extension that will like try to figure out what this person's work email is if you're trying to get to them directly.
Have you ever?
For me,
oh, sorry.
I was just gonna say. Oh, go ahead, Brittany. Go ahead. I was just gonna say I was kind of opposite. I went ham on meetups. I went to meetup almost every single night. In San Francisco, you have that luxury. One, I was broke, so I got free dinner at the meetups. I spent my whole life saving almost to go to Dev Bootcamp. I did not have a lot of life savings. I was not very career oriented before I became a software developer. I kind of just was like, I'll just do whatever. Life is fine. That changed when I became a software engineer. But yeah, so I just went ham on meetups. I still go to, well, not now, but like before we got shut down, I still go to like, I was still going to 1 or 2 meetups a week, probably at least like 1 a week. There's like a few meetups in San Francisco that I'm just became a part of the community. I became friends with the organizers and stuff. That's also how I got jobs too. Like I became friends with one of the meetup organizers and I made a conference site for him. He put on a React conference and I was like, oh, you're using Gatsby? I want to learn how to use that. I'll just make it for you. He was going to pay me, but I just did it just for fun because I wanted to like try out Gatsby. I never used Gatsby before. And then he like tried to hire me to do every single conference website he did after that. But I was able to like refer that to people in my network. So I got other people jobs. And it's just from the connections I made from like going to meetups. I was going to that meetup for years, so I became friends with him. I saw him every time I went to the meetup and like talked to him. So everybody has their different strategies. You got like, I don't know if I would advise going to meetups if you don't like it. I personally like it. I like learn stuff, meet people. Some of the meetups have really good food. The HTML5 meetup in San Francisco, highly recommend once they open everything back up. The Google chefs like make you dinner and you get to go hang out in this beautiful deck they have that the view is the Bay Bridge. It's super nice. Okay, what were you saying, Ray? Sorry.
It wasn't even that great. I was gonna see if anyone had ever used the Stack Overflow job section, because that's where I had heard about Trunk Club, and that's where I applied through. But in general, right now, job boards aren't so great. I think it's better if you can go to the website itself and apply through there to get a little bit of better chance that maybe somebody will look at your resume.
Fun fact, GitHub actually has like a job product. It's called GitHub Jobs, but it's been abandoned. But yeah, there's like a million board things.
Yeah, I never used any job boards. Me is just social media, going to meetups to keep track of like interviews that I actually did get or whatever. I just use Google Sheets. I didn't even use Trello or anything. I just make like green, yellow, red. Like if I like failed the interview, I just make that line red. I still leave it on the sheet as a history that I applied at this company, and I leave notes usually about who I talked to. I just add any notes in the sheet. So, and usually I'll add almost everybody on LinkedIn for people, unless I really bomb the interview, then maybe. But even sometimes when I bomb the interview, if it was like some like well-known person that I interviewed with in the industry, I go straight and add them on LinkedIn so they know who I am because I just interviewed with them. I'll go add them as soon as the interview is over and be like, "Thanks for interviewing me." And I was able to get like my LinkedIn is pretty solid right now because I interviewed at a lot of companies, and a lot of times they just accept your connection because they remember who you were. They're like, "Oh, I just interviewed this person."
Yeah, I also think, yeah, reaching out to the interviewers after is really good. Especially like there's been some people I interviewed with. I didn't take the job, but I was like, oh, like they were like a really good manager, like you could tell, or like, oh, like we got along really well. And I'm not gonna, I may or may not take that job, but like let's just be on each other's radar. And you can start building your own like community. Once you become an engineer, all of a sudden, like everyone you know is an engineer, and you all try to get each other jobs. Like former managers will try to poach you, and like once you get that initial first like door, like foot in the door is hard, but after that, like it is just substantially easier.
Yeah.
For reference, my last like interview round was 2 years ago, and all I did was cold apply because all the companies I wanted to work at like didn't have anyone I knew. So it's like slim, but like cold applications could work. It's just you just can't bank on them like you can with networking and having a direct contact and asking for a referral.
Yep.
What about for skill building? I feel like my favorite is interview cake. I know we talked about it last week also, but it's nice because it'll give you the question, then kind of walk you through if you still need hints.
Yeah. For me,
Is Code Wars still a thing?
I think it's still.
I don't know. I used to use that too. I like leak code the best for algos data structures. Still for my current skills, the only thing I focus on, I'm not interviewing, so I focus on just making skills that I need for my job better. So I watch a ton of front end masters, like a lot. I watch so many front end masters courses. I really, that's one of my favorite things for front end. Egghead IO is another one that I like. I do execute program, which is made by Gary Bernhardt and some other people. Gary Bernhardt is the person who, there used to be a site called Destroy All Software. I think it's still up. Really good videos. The famous JavaScript WAT video is from Destroy All Software. I don't know if you've seen it. If not, try Google it. It's hilarious. And if you never watched it, watch it just so you know about inside jokes. Like even like in Slack at work or just on social media, you see people do WAT. You might not get where that's from. That's kind of in the developer community. It's most of the time referencing that JavaScript WAT video. It's about JavaScript being weird. So execute program, because they have a TypeScript course. It's to build muscle memory, which normally people tell you don't waste your time memorizing stuff. But for muscle memory, for like TypeScript stuff or just JavaScript array methods or whatever, it kind of helps you go a lot faster just to, you're not memorizing it by reading a book. You just do these little exercises, like 5 minutes a day, 5-10 minutes a day. So if you make it part of your routine, it's not something you dread either. Just, this is part of my day. I wake up, I drink coffee, and I do this exercises for 10 minutes on execute program. It's just about building the habit of doing it. And also, since I pay for it, it's easier to get started because you got to feel like, oh, I'm paying for this. I should make use of it. I pay for all these things. Front-end masters is the most expensive, though. I think I pay like $450 a year or something like that. Yeah, those are the main ones I think I use. I use a lot.
I'd also recommend, in addition to like those like small practice things, trying to find like tutorials for like larger projects. Like YouTube, there's so many free resources, right, to walk you through a tutorial like building an app or building this or that. Recommend like maybe in it like doing something like that, a longer term side project like that, while you're doing these other things like to practice every day.
Yeah,
because then you can like have something to put on your like, one, you can have something to talk about during interviews. You can have something to put on your GitHub or your GitLab or whatever you're using. You can also have and through doing those projects, you can like actually think about holistically how you're building something, and how like your app relates to each other. And you run into like a lot of problems that, you know, like doing things on Code Wars and Leak Code are kind of isolated. You run into like some of those problems when you're building your app. It's just in more context, right? Like you're not talking about like very abstracted things. You're talking about like, I'm building an app for like a menu management thing. There's a lot of challenges that go with that you can discover through a project. So definitely recommend, like, there's a million, I think, tutorials on YouTube that are free. Or if you want to pay for something like Udemy, is it Udemy, whatever. They have like a bunch that are pretty cheap sometimes, like less than $10. Yeah. And those are really cool. And I put those on my GitHub when I was first starting out. Like I would put the project on there and I would like try to make an actual README so people can like understand what you were even doing. Yeah, so I recommend definitely trying to pick up like a little project, especially if you're not comfortable doing like open source work. Also, open source work can like take fucking forever to get through. Like you could have like an issue in a PR forever. So you can't really count on like that being a consistent source of learning for you.
Yeah, I agree. Doing a mix. It depends on the mood for me. I just put a link in the chat about a project I work on. I made it at a hack day at work one day. It was just a tool that I wanted to use and it didn't exist. I work a lot with maps, so it's like a mapping geocoder tool. And then it got kind of popular. Like somebody wrote a blog post on like a tutorial on how to use it. And now I pin it to my GitHub because it has 62 stars on it. So yeah, and all it is it's just one file. It's one React component And I never published anything like very useful. I published like a tic-tac-toe thing before the NPM just to learn how to deploy like a little package. But then I use this to learn how to do a better deploy. And yeah, so I mix it up. This is like one small project, and then if I'm eating dinner or whatever, I'll watch front-end masters because I don't need to type. I just watch and consume it. Execute program, I usually do that like last at the end of my day. It's just the routine I kind of like develop. I don't do it every day either. Sometimes I'm too exhausted from work. But I try to do at least 5 minutes, 10 minutes a day because that's not too hard to like commit that much time for the day for that. So yeah, a mix is good.
Cool. All right, next question. Ooh, this one's good. Is it better to take a full-time software engineering job or a master in computer science? I'm a CS major, senior in college, and the master's would be free. Wow. Amanda, you might be muted.
You're still muted.
I'm still muted?
No, I hear you now.
You're back.
Oh, okay. It's a good question. I don't have a master's in computer science, so I don't know what that experience is like. If I was in that same position, I would. Well, is the master's always going to be free, or is it like a limited time offer?
That was my question.
Yeah, because like if it was possible, I would probably take the full-time engineering position first. It's a limited time offer. Is that what I just heard?
It would be safe for another year. But it's paid for by the school.
Oh, okay.
But after that,
if you have the time, I would take a full-time offer because then you get to see like what's actually like to be an engineer. You get to like evaluate if that's what you want. It also depends what you want to do with your master's, right? Like, do you want to get a master's and then still essentially just, go back, be a full stack engineer, do whatever you're doing? Because you don't necessarily need a master's degree to do that, right? But if you're trying to get a master's degree because you're trying to go into like a higher level, like architecture, like systems type of thing, where you really need like that academic focus, then yeah, go get your master's because that's what you want to do. Otherwise, I don't think you're going to make, if you just want to be a full stack engineer, I'm not sure that you would make like more money or be somehow like,
I don't think you
like,
will.
Yeah, I don't think you'll make more money having a master's per se. There might be obviously like more conservative companies.
I just pressure my family.
Family
I didn't
pressure.
hear that.
I think it's okay.
So your connection's not that good.
Because I went into the master's program at university because it.
Maybe type it in the chat,
Hello?
man. Your connection's not that good.
Hello?
Maybe just type it out in the chat. You keep cutting out.
I think I heard something about family pressure to get.
Yeah.
Because
I
it's
wouldn't
there.
do it. I always buck my family. I do opposite of what they want me to do. They tried really hard not to get me to join the Peace Corps, and I was like, "Peace out, I'm going."
I get why, like, to a lot of people getting a I think to a lot of people in a lot of industries, having a bachelor's and getting a master's like is a logical conclusion, right? Like a logical step to getting more money or progressing in that career. I don't think that's necessarily true in software engineering. I don't know how to make your family understand that, that is not like the logical thing. But I guess they do have a point in that, like, if it doesn't cost you any money, well, it costs you opportunity costs, right? Because you're going to be losing the salary that you would have if you were just working. And then you're also losing kind of the experience. Because then when you do jump into like back into software engineering, you're going to be jumping back like 2 years, right? It's going to take 2 years out of your career progression. And it's only 1 year. If this was me, if I was in your position, it's 1 year and it's free, and and this is an assumption that my family would support me because they know that, hey, I'm not gonna have a job for another year. And you actually like feel like you could get through it and that you're motivated to like do the coursework. And I guess like, you know, better, it can only help you, right? Like it won't necessarily hurt you to have a master's. But you just have to know that like it's not guaranteed to actually help you get a better job or to get more money. That's not what it's gonna do for you. I actually had thought about getting a master's at some point. I was like, back when I was in boot camp, I was like, oh, I'll work for a little bit and I'll like get a master's degree in computer science. And I've since abandoned that dream because I understand the industry more now and I understand that's not necessary. Honestly, I have no interest in staying in school or going back to school, so I probably wouldn't do it because I just like, I wouldn't be happy for that year, and I'd rather be working and getting that experience. Because when you're like actually doing, again, I wasn't a computer science major, but it seems that like the coursework you do is very different from actually being an engineer. I really enjoyed being an engineer, and I'd rather do that than coursework. That's just my opinion, though. Obviously, like your situation seems pretty like there's a lot of other things going on. Get more higher paying. I don't think you would get higher paying engineering job. Maybe you'll open more doors. Yeah, maybe you'll open more doors if you're looking for possibly more academically driven work, like systems or architectures or your theoretical things. You probably require a master's to get into that kind of stuff. Also, maybe for more conservative companies, like let's say you're a very like conservative bank or like whatever, and they have like very strict requirements on like you must have a bachelor's degree for this position, you must have a master's degree for this position. There's companies that require you have like a master's to be a manager, right? So yeah, I mean, I suppose that could be if you're looking for that kind of thing later down the road. But the current tech industry, I don't think they really care if you have a master's or don't.
I think they would prefer the experience in the industry over the person with a master's and no experience.
Yeah. And I know the money thing is like important. Like it's quite a deal to get a free master's degree. But if you really want it later on, like with a stable engineering job, you could pay for a master's later on.
Yeah.
Or better yet, get a company to pay for you to go get your master.
And I'm still thinking about the opportunity cost of like, assuming you can go out and get a job in just a couple of months. And that could be something that throws a wrench in this whole answer. But yeah, there's a huge opportunity cost. A master's degree is probably not going to be anywhere near the cost of a salary for an engineer.
Yeah, and especially in Silicon Valley, you can move up really fast. So even just being 1 year behind, you're just gonna slow down your progression. Like you can move up. It's crazy how fast you can move up here.
Okay.
Next question.
Yeah. Amanda, where do you see yourself in 2, 5, and 10 years? Would you want to move into management or still be working closely with code?
Yeah, these are like two pretty distinct paths, and you'll probably run into this once you get into that like senior territory. People start asking what you want to do, because the next step after senior is typically staff or like a principal engineer, and that's like, I mean, at least at GitHub, that's like pretty heavy. That's like the expectation for that is very high. Jumping from senior to staff is crazy, and I've seen people be seniors for like 15 years, 20 years, and they just want to be a IC. So an IC is an individual contributor. It's what you call someone who's like not in management. I personally am on the track to probably go into management at some point because I don't think I'm going to be like a staff engineer. I don't think that's what really interests me in the long term. Like I don't want to be working. Yeah, I just don't think that that's something I want to work towards, and I'd probably be a better fit for management. So yeah, I think that's probably where I see myself. I think probably within the next 2 years, I want to move into management. Knowing myself, there's like going to be like a technical ceiling that I reach that I'm probably just not going to be interested in breaking. Like I just don't, it's not like, that's not where I gain most of my satisfaction from. I gain a lot of satisfaction from like completing a project holistically and like working through getting that done. And that's not always like what staff engineers are doing. So I think I'll probably be in management. I've begun that conversation already. You want to begin that conversation pretty soon. And they were asking me, I've been asked about this since I was not a senior. So like definitely expect that people are going to ask you like, are you going down the IC track or are you going down the management track? There is more growth in the management track because you can become like manager, then director, then like even more into like the business world when you're talking about like VPs and stuff like that. You're very far removed from anything technical at that point, like crazy far removed. Whereas for the engineering IC track, there's like going to be a ceiling for sure, right? Like you get to senior, then you get to staff, then principal, and blah, blah, blah. But there's kind of like a harder ceiling with the IC track than with management because management opens you up to like just business in general. So it really depends on what you want to do. I personally am probably going to move into management. But don't think that that is the only way you can go. I think a lot of engineers think that like after you become an engineer for a while, the only thing you can do is become a manager. But I've seen people who have stayed ICs and are engineers, and that's what they want to do with their careers, and that's perfectly fine. Not everyone should be a manager. I'm sure people have all had bad managers before that should never have been a manager. So not everyone's like should be. It's a totally different career and totally different position. It's just because you're a good engineer does not make you a good manager, and vice versa. So just like take that into consideration. And also, I've seen also people move into like flip-flop throughout their career. They're a manager, then they become an IC, then they go back to management because they miss it, or they go back to engineering because they miss it. We just actually hired a senior on my team who was a manager for the last like few years. So people definitely flip-flop back and forth. Like you shouldn't see it as like they're on the same track, and being a manager is a promotion. In a lot of companies, it's not a promotion. It's like a lateral move, and they're two separate tracks. So you shouldn't see like, oh, someone who went from management going back to engineering. That's not like a demotion per se. It's just two different roles.
Next question here is, I've been offered some freelance work at a pretty low rate to make sure that it's a good fit. Is this typical for a fresher, and how and when should I ask for a raise?
I've never done freelance, so I'm not sure what is typical. I'd be pretty skeptical of people offering you a low rate or asking you to do anything for free. Like just for freelancing in any industry, like even like photography, art, it seems like people are going to try to take advantage of you. So you need to set that standard. Yeah, I'm not really, I've never done freelance work, so I'm not sure what that like.
My first contracted gig in 2013 was $25 an hour, and I just did it for like 6 months. I think I did it, and then I bounced for like a full-time job. But even my first full-time job, I didn't get paid a market rate salary. The startup didn't have any money. They didn't raise any money yet. They were nice and I decided to just do it. They had promised me to pay a normal salary as soon as they raised a seed round, and I just did it. I did. They gave me a bunch of equity, but my starting salary was only $4,000 a month, which is way below San Francisco market rate salary. And I did it. And I thought we would get funding within like 6 months. It took like a year, but I just stuck it out because I was like learning a lot and it was fun. And we got funding in like a year, and it was a good experience. And yeah, my salary more than doubled after we got funding. So it's all depends on. This is also a subjective question too. Like, there's all kinds of trade-offs you can make. For me, my rent was cheap, even though I lived in San Francisco. I had rent control, so I could afford to live on $4,000 a month. Most people, I don't think they could live on that salary in San Francisco, especially if you have a family. I don't think there's no way you could survive on that in San Francisco. But so yeah, just to give you an idea, and this is back in 2013, so those were the kind of rates that and $25 an hour is like really low for a developer. It depends on your area, but for San Francisco, that rate is really low because your rate should probably be, I think most people say like double what your salary would be because you're not getting any benefits, you're not getting any equity, nothing. So you got to take that all into account when you set your rate. And most people say double of what like the market salary rate is supposed to be. But for me, I didn't apply to the job. Somebody just handed it to me and I was like, I want to hack on something, let's do it. And it like paid my rent, so I just did it.
Yeah, this is speculation on my part, but if someone's first interaction with you as a freelancer is trying to lowball you, you're probably not going to have a good time with them on the project.
Yeah, we've talked a lot about like pros and cons of working at whatever price just to get some experience on your resume. Something about it being freelance makes me like somehow more skeptical. I don't know why.
It all depends on the situation though, because like maybe they don't have any money. But if they've like already raised money and they're offering you like some really crappy rate, that's a red flag.
Good point. Yeah.
And
And then
it also depends. It could be like a nonprofit or something, you know, like that makes a difference too. Maybe you care about what they're doing and you want to like help them out, even though they don't have a lot of money. So there's a lot of things that you got to consider.
Oh, and the other part of it was how and when should I ask for a raise? Yeah. I think that's the point also.
Is that specifically for this, like a freelance gig, or is that just like in general?
I would guess it's related to this.
For the
yeah. I'm assuming if it's, I mean, again, I've never done freelance, but I would, before I took the job, if I know I was going to have a low rate, before I took the job, I would try to get an agreement with them on like, I'll be at this rate for this amount of time. At this point, we're going to have to readjust the compensation and have that timeline clearly from the beginning.
If also the low rate is just to check for a good fit, maybe that timeline should be short. Maybe just like 1 month, you can tell already if it's going to be a good fit after 1 month. So you can you can even put it in the contract. If you don't know the person, most people will tell you to get it in writing to make sure. I didn't do that. I'm lucky they like held up their part of the deal. But most people will tell you get it in writing. Just be like, 1 month, this is my rate. After 1 month, it doubles or whatever you decide on.
Yeah.
Nice. We're already, wow, we're 4:03 Chicago time. Should we keep going? We've just got the 3 left.
Yeah, I can try to answer the 3 really quickly.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, let's just blast through it then. You can just
Okay.
answer the last 3.
So what were you able to transfer, or were you able to transfer any skills from sales to development?
Yeah, I think when you're an engineer, you work with a lot of other teams, kind of stakeholders, and it's kind of like in sales, if you're working with customers, you have to like follow up, follow through with things, communicate, kind of stuff like that, for sure. Again, I was only in sales for 6 months. I don't even know what skills I really developed. These are just like maybe just workplace skills. But I'm not good at selling. I don't know if I'm good at selling people an idea. Like if I'm trying to sell them like a technical idea, that's not something I don't think I'm like, I transferred over.
Okay, next one. What criteria to consider when picking a boot camp?
Yeah, I think, again, I think full stack is a good idea because most people probably don't know what they want to do after, and it leaves it kind of open. Of course, if you know what you want to do after, then you could be more specific about picking like a front end bootcamp or a back end or data science or whatever it may be. I would also consider the support system. If the bootcamp doesn't have like full-time instructors, or there's some weirdness with like, you only get like, there's like one instructor and he or she is only there part-time, like that's weird. Like you shouldn't be paying that much money to be taught by like other recent bootcamp grads, right? Like I've seen bootcamps that do that, where you're essentially taught by people who just graduated, and you shouldn't be paying tens of thousands of dollars to have that experience. Like if you're paying that money, there should be a professional, somebody who's actually worked in software development teaching you. So asking about kind of, you know, asking about how many full-time instructors they have, how often they're available. For Dev Bootcamp, it was good because it was their full-time job. Like they worked at Dev Bootcamp 8 to 5 every weekday. So it was their job. At other bootcamps, it's not the same. Sometimes these people are like, they have like a day job, like I work at GitHub, but I work part-time at a bootcamp to teach. So I think that's really important, like the type of instruction that's available. Perhaps like the resources, like if they have like a career team that will help you. I'm pretty skeptical about that kind of stuff because how much help they can really give you. Class sizes could be important too. And I would recommend doing something that is
as the
yeah. I just want to say, yeah, like class sizes could be important, and I recommend doing something if you can that is like in person, if you can. I just think it's better because you get more immediate help, and the feedback cycle is a little bit less.
As the author of this question, I just wanted to expand on it a little bit. I am a software engineering student studying software engineering, but I'm at this like point where I'm like, should I go to boot camp to just get the skills and get the job because I'm sick of the coursework? And I mean, you 3 are all working as software engineers, and I'm going to be hurting myself in the long run by not finishing that degree. I mean, I can always take like one class on the side once I have a job. But I'm like, I'm sick of this classroom work that I don't feel like is actually training me to be a software engineer. And I'm wondering if I go to the boot camp, if I learn these skills, if I get the job, do I renew some of this passion that I have for the industry?
I think
I know.
I think you'll be a lot happier once you're like, I think you're right that you will be happier like actually working the job. It's very different from coursework. It's not going to hurt you to finish your degree. Like there is no way that like having a CS degree would hurt, right? Like it pads your resume in a way that like you don't have to explain yourself, right? Like during interviews, you don't have to explain yourself, which is what like I had to do. Like, oh, why did I do this? I think if you don't have that much time left, I mean, do you even need the boot camp? Could you just start applying for jobs without like, just put that you're in the middle of getting a degree and you start applying for jobs you get a job and you finish your degree on the side? Like, do you even need to go to a boot camp to do that?
I think it helps. I think it helps. I've done both. I got a CS degree and went to a boot camp. I also know somebody who went to the boot camp who did what you're describing. They had 1 year left. They took time off. They went to Dev Bootcamp. They got a job after at Gusto, I think. It's a pretty big startup. And then after they worked at Gusto for like a year, they went back and finished up their last year of their degree. I think they might have did it simultaneously somehow while they were still working at Gusto. And then I forget where they work now. They work somewhere else, and it worked out for them. So I don't know if it's not a silver bullet, but I think a bunch of people do that. Like they just want to get some experience and see what both sides are like. This is what all the theory in school is like. And then boot camp kind of prepares you for the job more because it's all practical. Like I couldn't build anything hardly when I graduated from university, since it's mostly like theory and you're not building a lot of real world applications. At the boot camp, you're going to be building stuff like every day that could like actually like turn into like a startup. Like it's like real ideas you come up with and you like build it. And some of them do become real startups. HipCamp started out from a Dev Bootcamp project. And now they raised $25 million. So
yeah, I don't know how much time you have left, but you could do like a part-time boot camp and then just start applying to jobs. And then if you get one, then you can make the decision, right? Whether to like pause school or not, if it's a good offer. But if you have like the means and like the ability to do a boot camp, like it's not gonna hurt. And you could totally do one like those part-time ones. There's like so many part-time ones or like remote ones nowadays that I think will be sufficient. Especially, I wouldn't recommend it to everybody. Like if you're coming from absolutely no experience, it would be maybe hard to do like a part-time one that's completely remote. But since you have some background, you could probably just do like there's like Block, or there's another one I'm forgetting, Thinkful. Like those are like kind of remote boot camps that you can do, and then just start applying for jobs. I mean, there's no harm in just applying for jobs. Like I know people who are in the middle of boot camp and they already started applying for jobs before they finished. So you can kind of do the same thing, just start applying for jobs.
Lambda School has a part-time.
Okay. Thank you for those thoughts.
Yeah.
Part-time remote for Lambda School. I mentored some students from Lambda School. Lambda School is a longer program though, so just got to keep that in mind. I think if you do part-time, it takes like a year or something to complete. Some of the other boot camps are like way shorter. Like when I went to that boot camp, it was only 9 weeks. It was like really short, super intense and short.
Yeah. Again, school will always be there, kind of. I mean, that's the kind of nice thing, right? Like if you pause, you could always go back and finish if you want. But if the opportunity presents itself to get a job, one, you'll be making money. I think you had fun with it. So I think it'd be well worth pausing school.
And if you do get your foot in someplace, you're probably not going to go back. I don't think so. There's no reason to like,
it's going to be hard to convince yourself to go back to school.
Yeah, because once you get in, like, I don't know how much going back to school would actually help.
The stigma is removed in it.
What is that?
So the stigma is removed within industry that if you have a boot camp and you can demonstrate your skills, that people are willing to give you a job for it. You don't necessarily have to have that software engineering degree.
Yeah, we hired a person. I mean, it's not every single company, but we hired a person that never graduated college at the company that I work at. Yeah. So as long as people can prove that they can get the work done and they can figure out how to teach themselves on the job, you don't necessarily need to have a degree. And I mean, yes, there are the more conservative parts of the industry, banks and maybe some financial areas, but many companies, and it's turning more and more into that. You can make it work without a degree.
Yeah, you just got to demonstrate that you can do the job somehow. just get your projects up. Like, even if you can make a project that has real users, that will totally demonstrate that you can build an app to like a company.
Yeah. The industry is marching towards just not caring. Like even what you expect to be conservative. Like I know banks are hiring bootcamp grads, like a lot of banks actually, like Chase, Citi, Discover, they all hire bootcamp grads now. So I think the only stigma left that I could see some companies like still working through is just having a degree, right? Like having a degree in anything might be like a blanket policy a company. I've seen companies have. Like I've seen companies have a policy of like, you just need to have a college degree. I don't care what it's in. I mean, we could argue about the validity of like, that's a stupid statement. But that could be possible. But for the most part, like really fun companies, like companies that you'd probably be interested in working in, they probably don't care. Like, I don't think GitHub cares. I know people who are here who don't have a degree.
Yeah.
They've just been working in software since like high school.
Even look at all the people who run the big companies, Zuckerberg and everybody. All of them are like college dropouts. They never finished their program. And now they're running the biggest companies in the world. And like they started by just building an app. Zuckerberg just made Facebook. And now it's like one of the biggest companies in the world.
Take the opportunity if you can. If it presents itself, yeah, like I do it, but.
Me too.
And
Cool.
I dropped the link in the chat for Career Karma. It's a community that helps you figure out what bootcamp is a good fit for you. It's a super huge community too. It's growing really fast. I think they have a mobile app too. I never tried it though.
Nice. Last question then. What are some strategies for achieving work-life balance as an engineer?
I think one of the greatest things about this job is the work-life balance. Software engineers do get paid a lot of money, and the job, honestly, if you find a good position, it's not that stressful. I think it has one of the best work-life balances out there for like how much you're getting paid to how much you're actually doing. I think that this is very subjective to who you are as a person. Some people like don't know when to get up from the keyboard and leave. This is a problem if you work from home, especially a problem if you work from home. And then I think that like, so you need to be able to break yourself off from like feeling like you need to finish everything during that day. But I think once you kind of get in the groove, you understand like no one expects you to like do all that work in that 1 day span. So stop and go live your life. Most companies that are in tech, even like most engineering departments are treated very well and kind of babied. A lot of engineers are babied by companies like PTO and like flexibility. And so you won't have to like, for the most part, fight for work-life balance. Although it has the same problems like any other job, right? If you're in a bad role, if you're in a bad position, if you're on a bad team, it could really stress you out, but that's not specific to engineering. One thing that could possibly disrupt your life is like a lot of companies have on-call rotation, so you could be on call. That is definitely an impact on work-life balance. I knew somebody I interviewed, he was on call 2 weeks at a time. So you want to.
Oh yeah, audio cut out.
Uh-oh. Yeah, I think the connection went bad.
Maybe your earbuds ran out. Your AirPods. We've been on a while. Sometimes the AirPods run out of juice.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, just on call could be something that I didn't know about when I started engineering, that was a thing. But yeah, you could be on call, which does disrupt your life, right? Because you have to be like available.
No, it happened again. I think they activated.
days at a time, I think. Days at a time. That really depends on the company. If you're really against it, there's some people I know who are never on call. So I guess that could be a thing. But overall, I think you'll find that you will really enjoy the work-life balance of being an engineer.
Yeah, definitely the best.
Yeah, definitely the best out of
anything I've ever done. And I've done like various other things. But remote does make it harder. But yeah, we've been going pretty long. Should we just wrap up? If anybody wants to stick around and introduce themselves, we can turn off the recording. And also, I'll share my LinkedIn if anybody wants to connect and we're not connected.